Right then, let's go.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the 2-on-1 Powerchair Football Podcast powered by MK Battery. We are exactly a week on from the conclusion of the 2025 EPFA Nations Cup, and what a week it turned out to be. 6 days, 29 matches, over 1,200 minutes of football, and enough drama, twists and talking points to fill an entire season. I am your host, Ryan Sipple, and joining me today is my commentary partner from the week, Gregg Baxter. Together we called every single of the action from the opening game right through to that dominant French final, and we're now back to relive the highs and the lows and to recognise the players and teams that defined the third iteration of the EPFA Nations Cup. If you've been following along with us, you'll remember we sat down before the tournament to make our predictions, who we thought would win it, the standout performers, the surprise packages, and more. And it's safe to say some of those calls aged better than others, and a few are probably best left unmentioned to spare us the embarrassment. But having put our neck on the lines once already, today we'll go full circle, looking back at who really delivered, who exceeded expectations, and who came away as the true stars of the week. Before all of that, though, just a big word of thanks to MK Battery. Their backing is really woven into every part of our sport, from supporting clubs at grassroots level to powering the international game and helping bring you this very podcast for the 25-26 season. Their commitment ensures that weeks like the EPFA Nations Cup can be celebrated properly, and we're proud to have their support. Greg, how are you, my friend?
I am very good, Ryan. Thank you very much. What a week it was indeed. I can't believe it's been exactly a week since we settled the EPFA Nations Cup. Brilliant tournament, fantastic weather on the most part, brilliant company. It really was just the best Powerchair Football tournament I've had the pleasure of being a part of.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Just to give an overview as to what this episode will cover, I think we'll do a full nation-by-nation assessment where Greg and I will reflect on the form, the results, the standout moments for each side. Across the episode, we'll talk about the surprise packages and the tactical evolutions that some of the teams exhibited, and of course those unforgettable individual performances that caught the eye. And then to close, after that nation by nation breakdown, we'll probably select our player of the tournament, team of the tournament, and fantasy team of the tournament. Before we do that, I think it's only right that we take a moment to talk about the setup of this Nations Cup, because for me, it was one of the most impressive aspects of the whole week. Hosted by the Federazione Paralimpica Powerchair Sport. From the very first day, everything felt purposeful, felt elevated. The venue itself, I'm not sure how well it translated over the streams, but it was spectacular how it was laid out. It gave a real sense of occasion, and it felt like we was part of something really special. Added to that, the atmosphere from start to finish, whether it was the Italian fans creating that unbelievable wall of noise, or the travelling supporters from across Europe bringing their colour and passion to everything. The organisation was top class. Every detail seemed to be thought through. And I think they deserve even more credit, because this is the first time that FIPS, the Italian organisation, has hosted a global event for Powerchair Football. And everything ran smoothly. As commentators, Greg, you and I were lucky enough to see it all up close, almost behind the scenes, the build up, the presentation, the sheer effort that went into making this Nations Cup not just a football competition, but a spectacle. How did you find it, the venue, the setup, the work of the Italian hosts? Because I think they've really set a benchmark now for how international Powerchair football should be staged.
Yeah, they've not only raised the bar, I think they've absolutely smashed it. It was perfect, to be honest. From a commentator point of view, we had a gantry with monitors in front of us so we could watch replays and see what the stream was showing. It was made it so that we could relay better the atmosphere and what was happening, and we could sort of almost communicate better with the people back home. From a wheelchair user point of view, I thought everything was top notch. The fact that you had an accessible beach 30 seconds walk from the back of the hotel, and you could go right the way down to the seafront almost, and then get in the sea with a beach chair, was just really, really good, that we could all stay together. No one was separated. Parents and carers and friends who were able-bodied could sit alongside their friends in wheelchairs, all together having fun in the sun. It was a really, really well-organised tournament, and I think we have to doff our caps to them and say, you set the standard now for tournaments going forward, such as Argentina next year, because you can't really fault anything. All the hard work they put in behind the scenes, that people may not have seen, that we did, they were always on their feet. Nothing was too big a job for them. You asked a question, you needed anything, they were going to provide it for you. The setup with the court, I thought, was incredible. The fact that we had sort of electronic screens, like advertising hoardings, made it felt really professional. The screens as players walked out the tunnel that had their faces on when we announced their names, everything just felt that much more professional, which was just made us elevate our performances, and I think elevated the competition as a whole.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. A question I would ask to you and the wider listeners for that matter is, what do you foresee being the perfect venue for a Powerchair football event such as this? Because we were part of the 2023 World Cup in Sydney, and that was exceptional. But it was a 2-court venue in a very large venue for that matter. And it almost divided attention and the atmosphere. With Italy for the Nations Cup, it was like a closed, contained arena that really exemplified the noise and the energy of the fans. And being one court, it meant that there was only one game at any one time, so all of the attention was drawn towards that respective fixture, and I think that played into the atmosphere. And we said it, some of the games that we watched, particularly host Italy, who we'll come on to in this episode, I've never heard noise like it. I've never felt energy like it. And that we fed off that as commentators.
Yeah, I think the fact it was a 1-court venue helped the players, because they knew that all eyes were on them. There was nothing else going on another court that, say in Australia for the World Cup, if you heard a shout from another court, naturally your mind's going to think, oh, what's going on over there? Your sole focus as a player was on the game you were playing. There was no distractions, and you knew that everyone else's sole focus was on you and what you were doing. And the fact that it was slightly more contained, slightly smaller, meant that the atmosphere was almost bigger. It's like in the running game, if a football team leaves their traditional older stadium and moves to a bigger one, fans can fear that they're going to lose the atmosphere. So I think that having a 1-court venue that was 30 seconds walk from the hotel, a minute walk from an accessible beach, it just felt properly professional, and like a really good job well done by the Italians, especially given that it was their first time hosting.
Yeah, we will certainly delve into those fans and players of the hosts. But something that really has stayed with me since is the amount of people that would come up to us on the commentary gantry or around the Bella Italia Sports Village and show me their notifications on their phones or smartwatches as to the decibel reading, which monitored the noise in the venue. And during certain games, it surpassed 100 decibels, which is akin to an extremely loud rock concert. And I've watched a few games back, and you do get a sense for the noise and the atmosphere, but I don't think it quite compares to being there in person, feeling that live. And I just want to once again commend the efforts of all 10 nations and the support they brought and the noise they created, because I've never ever experienced anything like it, even at the World Cup and former international competitions.
Yeah, it was, to us, sometimes goals would go in and the crowd noise would be that insane that we are having to literally, we feel like we are yelling and screaming down the mic to try and convey what's going on and try to hear ourselves. And then you watch it back on the stream and you're like, well, it definitely wasn't that quiet in my ears. The atmosphere was, like you say, it was the best I've ever had the privilege of experiencing for a Powerchair football match. It was just incredible. Every time it just built and built and built as the tournament went on. As more and more pressure got put on the games, the atmosphere got that much better, that much more tense, that much more electric. It was, like I say, just a pleasure and a privilege to be a part of.
And I want to also talk in more of an overarching sense about the quality of football, because you was part of the last iteration back in 2019. So you can probably compare and contrast better than most. How did you find it from terms of the entirety of the games and the squads? Because the quality, the consistency, it's clear that Powerchair football is developing across the continent, and it's such an exciting time to be involved.
Exactly that. I think it showed the development of Powerchair football across the continent in the 6 years since the last iteration. Because in Finland, we had the newer teams like Austria and Northern Ireland at the time. When they played England and France, they were on the end of sort of 16, 18-0 thrashings. We only had one game across all 29 at this tournament that got to double figures. That's just 10, let alone. So I think every team put in performances that just showed their levels have increased so much. The development was incredible to watch. The standard of the tournament across the board was, I think, a lot better than 6 years ago. And that's just credit to the work that the teams have clearly put in away from the sport in the last 6 years.
Yeah, I mean, I was very privileged to be part of the EPFA Cup 2022, which served as the qualification event for this competition for the non-World Cup nations. So the likes of Belgium, Germany, Spain, Italy. And it was just incredible to see how they've developed over the last 3 or 4 years. And added to that, we had the EPFA Nations in 2023 as well. So we saw slow increments in terms of the development of certain nations, but nothing, I don't think, could have prepared us for the levels of performances and the consistency exhibited across the 2025 EPFA Nations Cup. And if they continue that trend and they can see that appreciation for their development on a kind of a global stage, because we had audiences from across the world, I would use this as a message to say, go back now, really focus on your development, because there's no reason why some of the lesser nations that finish lower in the standings can't emulate what Italy did, defying all odds and expectations to now secure one of the very valuable World Cup tickets for next year. It's incredible.
It really is. The standard was raised above the board. Games that you sometimes thought would be easy wins for certain teams were anything but. Teams were made to work hard for their 3 points and their wins in this tournament, and it made it just a joy to commentate on.
Yeah, I mean, it was fairly intense commentating all 29 games, but I don't think we would have changed that because we was able to watch every second, every goal, every significant moment. And that's why I wanted to get together today to just really close the chapter almost on what was an incredible week, but shine a light on some of these teams and performers who deserve the spotlight. Before we do go on that breakdown of each nation, just one other point that I want to discuss with you is the officiating from the EPFA Nations Cup, because I think it deserves so much credit. Anyone who is a regular follower of Powerchair Football would have probably watched the most recent Club World Cup, where the big talking points far too often centered around refereeing decisions, things such as inconsistency and lack of clarity. It was very frustrating, not only for fans and commentators, but players and coaches. And at times, it really took away from the spectacle of the football itself. So, understandably, for many, there was a bit of concern due to the recency of Paris that we might see the same sort of issues crop up at the Nations Cup. But I want to make it very, very clear, while there were odd decisions that could be debated across the 29 games that we had, as there will always be in any sport, at any level, the overall integrity, quality and consistency of the officiating in this competition, I thought was outstanding. I really do. I want to give full credit to Caroline Goldsborough, who oversaw things as head of European referees, the job she did in guiding the experienced heads of Nico Ballin and Steve Crump and the whole roster as a whole. It gave real strength and unity. And we often say in football and on commentary that if you don't need to talk about the officials, they've done their job well. But actually this week, we do need to talk about them, because what they delivered elevated the competition and let the football shine. I was so impressed with it from start to finish. You've experienced a whole range of officiating standards at domestic and international level. From the perspective of a fan and a commentator, how did you find the week?
You've taken the phrase that I was going to say already. I was saying, if you don't talk about referees during the commentary, they've usually had a very good game. But you're right to say that we should highlight just how good the standard was across the board throughout the week. And I don't know if, like you say, people may have been worried or have questions coming into the tournament. I don't know if the referees would have felt any sort of pressure, but they didn't show it if they did. They let the football do the talking, let the game flow as much as they could, but when they needed to, stamp their authority and cut out any niggling fouls or contact off the ball, they did so with aplomb. They got the cards out when they needed to, weren't afraid to book them straight away if it was their first time offence. They, like I said, they played advantage when they could. Let the football flow, let the football start, let the players do what they do best. That's all we ask. Let them be the stars of the show. And I think they did that to a massively high level, every single one of them.
Yeah, I completely agree. My thing with officiating, and I try not to be too critical when it comes to officiating, because it's something I never wish to do. So I always proceed with a little bit of caution. But all I ask for is clarity and consistency. Referees to set their expectations early on, so the players know where they are, and consistency, as you've said. If there was contact allowed for one team, it was for the other. If there was contact punished for one team with a yellow card, it was reciprocated for the other. There was just that consistency across the whole competition. I don't think we saw a red card, correct me if I'm wrong, but several yellow cards. There was that consistency. But the referees, whether it was a clear mandate or learnings from Paris, they just wanted to facilitate open football, almost physical football. And I mean that in the right sense, that no one's appealing, no one wants fouls. People want to battle for balls. They want to show their passion. They want to impress the travelling fans. And the fact that we're coming away to on the top of my head with no question marks as to certain decisions or referee performances, I think speaks volumes as to the developments they've shown in just a couple of months, because several of those referees were in Paris for the Club World Cup. And just to cap it off, I thought Robbie Byrne in the final did a brilliant job. I can see your reaction where you're probably going to go on to talk about him yourself. Almost too lenient. He wanted to, and he could have very easily given John Bolden a red card at any point in the first or second half. But I think he felt he had a duty of care and responsibility to the sport. And because this was such a great spectacle with the eyes of the world watching, keeping him on and keeping it fair and equitable really helped the occasion. And it almost would have taken away from France's achievement. And that would have grabbed the headlines come the conclusion of the game, which shouldn't be the case. France, as we will most definitely discuss at length, were supreme on every single level, metric, expectation. But that was facilitated by Robbie Byrne and his officials for that one.
You can tell we've just spent a week together, can't you? Because we're thinking alike. Yeah, I was going to highlight Robbie's performance in the final. I thought he was exceptional. Really let the game flow when he could. But when you've got the personalities and the characters you do in a game between England and France, he really handled the occasion well. Stamped his authority down when he needed to. Told Momo and John on numerous occasions to cut it out. Probably could have sent John Bolden off, but chose not to for the final, for the occasion, understanding what it meant to the players. I can't speak highly enough of how well I thought he officiated the final.
Yeah, completely agree. It's really nice to come away from a competition of that magnitude with there being no question marks over what is a huge aspect and element of the sport that we love. So naturally, when they do a good job, we want to shout it from the rooftops because, as mentioned, it shows clear developments from the Club World Cup, which was only a couple of months ago. So, right, let's get on to the football itself. 10 nations competing in this third edition of the European Championships over 6 days. There is so many stories to unpack. We'll probably have to condense that a little bit because otherwise this episode could go on for many, many hours. It's fair to say every team had its highs and its lows, though in France's case, their lows were probably just moments where they didn't score quite as many as expected. And we'll go through each of them one by one, starting with who finished bottom of the standings and working our way up to the champions, because I think we feel every nation deserves recognition for the part they played in what was a historic competition, as we've already mentioned. So we will start with Germany, who finished bottom in 10th. Their week began with a 2-0 defeat to Belgium, then 2 heavy losses against Northern Ireland and France. I think really underlined the gulf at this level. Against Spain, a more similarly matched nation, they had more control at times, but still slipped to a 2-0 defeat. And then in the 9th, 10th playoffs against Scotland, they actually went ahead through a spectacular long-range strike from FA Kano Namis, but they couldn't hold on and eventually lost 2-1. So overall, a really tough return. 5 games, 5 defeats, just 1 goal scored and 20 goals conceded. Greg, how do you assess Germany's first Nations Cup showing?
I think you've already said that the key bit there is this was their first outing at a Nations Cup. They've got to take that into consideration. It's going to be a learning experience. They're in a group with some experienced nations in like Northern Ireland and France. I said this to him because I spent a lot of time with the group and with head coach Nuri during the week. I said, look, you've got to stick together. You can't get disheartened. You've got to treat it as a learning experience. These teams like Northern Ireland were where you guys were 6 years ago. They were getting beaten, 12, 16-0 by the likes of France and England. So don't look at it now. Look at what it can do for you in the future. And at times, I think, especially in that 9th, 10th playoff, they did relax and they were able to show that they were trying to do the right things in front of the pickoffs and looking to play the passes when they could. They never seemed to quite get their starting 4 down. I think there's a lot of chopping and changing in personnel and player positions, and sometimes it looked as though that affected the cohesion of the group, that they're sometimes playing more individually than as a team. And I think their discipline was what cost them in the early games. Too many 2-on-1s on the edge of the box. Not sometimes given with 3 in the box, which at this level you can't really do. But I think the main thing for us, which is what we said on commentary, is we want to see every team at least score a goal. We want them to have one moment where they can say, yeah, that's a highlight, that we can take that and build on it. So I was really pleased when they took the lead in that 10th playoff. Brilliant goal by EPFA Nations Cup, from his own half. Open goal, fired it in, and I think it was no less than the group, and especially the Germany fans who did not stop making an absolute racket the entire week, deserved. So I hope that they are not too disheartened. They can look back from fondness at their first international tournament, the socialising around it, and they can build on it from there.
Yeah, I completely agree with your assessment. One thing I just want to say, we commentated upwards of 1,400 minutes across the competition, whether that's live action, analysis, pre-game information or post-game analysis. So in that time, we are always going to maybe upset people with our assessments, and people will question our analysis of certain games, teams, selections. But I just want to reiterate, it's completely impartial and objective. That's something we have to do as commentators. So firstly, I just want to apologise if anyone has been offended with our commentary at any point. But with Germany, and this is a case, I'm getting to my point, is something that can be applied to so many different teams, is I don't think we saw their best team at any one point. And that is a completely objective perspective from someone who was able to watch all the football, watch individual player profiles and seeing how they could potentially mould into a collective. And I think you said it a second ago. There's individuals in that squad. There is talent within that squad. But how it comes together as the collective is the real question mark. And for me, Germany never quite found the right formula. They shuffled the lineup a lot, but never really struck the balance. For me, I think we said it on commentary. I'd love to see them have Acacio Cossa as the goalkeeper with Marco Rollman in front. I think that is a really dynamic pairing, which is also defensively sound. And then I want the wide players to be the likes of the Daniel Oleks, the Ludwig Leinwebers, the Thies Otterstetters. I think that has a real balance about it, but they persisted for the most part with Daniel Olek in goal, something we're unfamiliar with, certainly when we've watched Germany in the past. I just hope that they go back to the drawing board now and assess different player performances in certain positions and really try to bring the best out of each individual, but in the context of the collective. Because at the EPFA Cup in 2022, they were exceptional, Germany. But since then, others have leapfrogged them in terms of development. So it's a question of selection and identity. And if they can regroup, refine that identity, I'm sure that their next international outing will be far more productive.
Yeah, I think you said it there. You need to look at what you have in terms of talent as an individual level, which there is no doubt they have a lot of, and just trying to merge and morph and sort of guide that into success on a collective level as a team. Because if they can do that and they can get back to what we saw a little bit of in Munich a couple of years ago and you saw in Geneva for the EPFA Cup in 2022, then there is a talent level there, and they can look to the likes of Italy, who have done incredible development, as we'll get onto later on, in those 3 years as a benchmark for what can be achievable for a team like Germany.
Yeah, I think what the week highlighted is just how much the standard has risen elsewhere. And if you're not willing to commit to the development and put that time, effort and energy in, you will almost be left behind. And sadly for Germany, that was almost the case in Italy, that they just wasn't up to the level of those around them. Give me your standout player for Germany, please, Greg.
I think Marco Rallmann for me in the middle. He exemplified what it meant to be a captain, looked to play the passes where he could, had to play with a change of started in goal at the beginning of the week, then shifted into the middle. I think he was a good benchmark that they can build around going forward.
He was certainly the standout in both Geneva and Munich, the two occasions in which Germany have featured in international competitions in the past. So I don't disagree with you. I think for me there was a real disconnect between the defence and the attack. If and when there was a little bit of connection and chemistry, I think we saw some really exciting wide players. So if I'm pushed for a standout player, I would probably say Ludwig Leinweber. I think his versatility, his timing, and potential is definitely there, but it's just about getting that understanding with that central player, whether it's Marco Rallmann or Akacio Kosa or other. Also want to highlight a player that we liked, Thies Otterstetter. Didn't feature a great deal across the competition relative to some of his teammates, but put himself in some fantastic positions that he really nearly capitalised on. Stayed in reverse, out wide, made some nice timed advancements up the court. It was just the connection that let him down, but that's something that comes with time and experience. So I have no doubt if he was to have featured in more games or the competition was longer, he would have found some real form.
Yeah, and I think that was a key theme across the week, was wingers staying in reverse, wasn't it? That's what we were crying out for a lot of the time. So Thies did that. I think he showed a lot of encouraging signs whenever he did get the opportunity. It was just that final connection that was sometimes missing, and it's one of those that a lot of the times in the commentary booth you're getting excited, you to know what's coming, and then you're like almost jumping over the gantry because you're wanting, you can see what they're trying to do. It just wasn't quite coming off.
Yeah, and I think the players and the nations will go back and review the footage and see how certain engagements of balls would be of benefit and would be a greater advantage than how they did engage them. So they've got the footage now, they've got the experience. So we say again, how they go back to their respective nations, Germany and others, develop, grow, and come back stronger in their next appearance. So no, a difficult week for Germany, but I'm sure they would have enjoyed the experience and will have a lot of points to work on now. Let's progress on to Scotland, who finished 9th. Closing out with a 2-1 win over Germany, as just mentioned. And for me, that victory felt really important because it rewarded what was otherwise an incredibly competitive set of performances. Apart from that heavy opening loss to England, whereby they lost 6-0, every single game they played was decided by just a single goal. So the story here is of incredibly narrow margins. They were never overawed, always in the contest, but just lacked that one decisive moment in front of goal that could have seen games tip their way. What did you make of Scotland's run, Greg?
Yeah, you said it again there. It's one of those where they just were so close in a lot of games. Their open play defending, I thought, was exceptional a lot of the times. They limited teams, given that they were probably the underdogs going into every single game in the group. I thought they frustrated teams quite well. Didn't give them any opportunities from open play. It was just same with Germany a little bit. Their set piece defensively, especially in that England game where 5 of the 6 goals came from set pieces, and their discipline on the edge of the box, which then gave teams free kicks, but which increased the pressure on them. So I think they could take real comfort and real heart in how they defended from open play. They just struggled to break and get forward more because they're then making little mistakes on the edge of the box that stop their momentum going forward. I think it's also fair to say there was a lot of, bit like with Germany again, there was a lot of chopping and changing in terms of personnel and finding the right shape and the right 4 to start with. But once they settled on the 4 we saw in the last couple of games, it showed that they really were trying to play forwards, play aggressive football, front bumpers again, switching the ball, spreading the play. They were trying to play attacking football. I think they've got a real benchmark now. They can say, look, okay, results didn't go our way, but performances-wise, we're not as far off as some may think.
Yeah, that's why I go back to what I said about people questioning our assessments, because across the competition we were calling out for Scotland to line up with wingers of Connor McCole and Ethan Galloway. Really dynamic, really exciting, but they just didn't opt to choose it until I think the very last game. And Scotland's big question marks weren't in their defensive stability, it was in their goal scoring. They were very organised. They matched the intensity of Ireland, Denmark and even Italy, but they couldn't find the finish to make it count. There was no connection between that defence and the wingers. And that's why Connor McColl's brace against Germany was so significant, not just for the win, but for showing what he brings in the attacking final third. You really do wonder why he wasn't given more game time earlier. Likewise, opting to put Tyler McClelland in the centre, he gave so much energy, precision. He can strike a ball so cleanly, and the diagonal links he had with the wingers was clearly the best they had shown all week. He's the clear standout to have that position, yet from a lot of the competition they opted to use him in goal, or he didn't feature at all. So I think it's a real learning experience for the coaches. But just like Germany, I hope that they will use the examples now to help inform their decisions in competitions in the future, because there is the blueprint for a very good team there, as shown by the very narrow scorelines across their fixtures.
I'm convinced we're sharing one brain at this point, Ryan, because I was about to highlight Tyler McClelland. I thought he was excellent in the middle. You could see the way he strikes the ball. I've had experience of playing against him when I've gone out to Scotland, and I knew there was a player there that could really operate in that middle role quite well. He's confident on the 180, switching the ball. He's got a lot of power in that bumper. I think he showed in the last couple of games, especially in that Germany game, just how crucial he is to their play going forwards. So I hope that they stick with him in the middle, because I think he gives them a real benchmark to build around moving forward. I think for Scotland, they played with a lot of pride. They had a lot of emotion coming into this tournament. You know, players who are no longer with us, you know, Colin Shields, Logan Mitchelson, they were, I'm sure, right there with them the entire week. We mentioned it on commentary. So they just wanted to go out and do them proud, do themselves proud, do the country proud. And I think to an extent they did that with how they played and how they defended.
Yeah, so they've certainly got the ingredients and the pieces, and if they can find a consistent source of goals and a connection, which I think is there, and it's the same with Germany, all of these nations were learning across the week. They were refining their formulas and trying to find the best setups, and a lot of them found them maybe when it was a little bit too late. So now they need to ensure that they're organising friendlies and participating in home nation style events to capitalise on that momentum, because it's going to be so important for their long-term development. Give me your standout player for Scotland.
It's hard to say. I thought Conor McCall made a big difference when he played in the wing, but he only played for, a game and a half? So it's hard to pick him. I'm going to say Tyler McClelland. He played a lot in various positions, and like I've already said, I think he was a real bright spot for them in the middle, and one they can build around for the future.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that assessment. I think Colin McCall made a huge difference when he was introduced into the action. It's clear that he has that instinct and positional play. I thought Ethan Galloway was much better when he was shifted to a wide position. But Tyler McClelland, I think the clear standout. There is a central player there that they need to build the squad around, because not only is he defensively sound, he links attack. So yeah, I completely agree. I think a good week for Scotland. Just look at them results against Denmark, against Italy and others, World Cup nations, ones that have booked their spot for Buenos Aires, Argentina. So they are maybe a year or two assuming good development away from putting themselves at that kind of top table and in that conversation of potential World Cup. Let's progress on to Spain, who finished 8th in the competition. Like Germany, like Scotland, making their debut at the EPFA Nations Cup. It was a tough introduction, starting with, I think, a 7-0 defeat to France. They lost again to Belgium, but their moment, arguably, of the competition came following a 2-1 win over Germany, sealed by a stunning long-range strike from Aaron Torralbo Sanchez. From there, it was defeats to Northern Ireland and Denmark. And then lastly, Republic of Ireland left them lower down the standings. But what I think they did show is real glimpses of promise and some real potential amongst their players. What did you make of their first outing?
I was really pleased with Spain. I think they showed a lot of heart. They played with a lot of passion. They weren't afraid to get stuck in, especially the captain, Radovan Bujaboud, who I thought was their standout player by some distance, with how he controlled the tempo of games and how he wanted to play the passes and looked to continually move the ball, which I think was a bit of a coming of age tournament for him, because before we talked about the tournament back in that podcast a couple of weeks ago, we all highlighted Samuel Groh Garcia as who we thought would be their standout player, because he is the more experienced and the more well-known player. But I thought Bujaboud was absolutely brilliant, and sometimes plays on the line a little bit too much and tries to commit too much aggression into his play. So just have to temper that a little bit. But Spain, I think they took a lot of positives from the week. They are clearly teams that could challenge, and they made it into that World Cup playoff. And I think they can really look forward to what is to come for them as long as they keep that group of core going, because they are a young squad as well. There's a lot of young players in that group who've got plenty of years for development.
Yeah, I think if I was to summarise Spain in a word, I would say raw. They are raw, but there is so much potential. I think there's a very nice balance between youth and experience. The likes of Gregg Baxter, Bujabud and Velasco, paired with the young complement of wingers in Espinosa, in Fabra Reina, and Marcos Garcia Trives. You said it, and I will reiterate. Radovan Bujabud was the standout. There's absolutely no question about that. Was the leader, was the dictator, was central to any and all success they had. But he does play on the line. He could have seen red on several occasions across the competitions. It's almost a miracle that he didn't, because some of those individual challenges could have seen red alone, let alone the accumulation of them across certain games. So he really needs to channel that aggression in a positive manner, because it did disrupt their rhythm. I think something we highlighted on commentary, and they can absolutely be forgiven for this, is their 2-on-1 discipline. They've never necessarily played at this level, at this intensity, so it can kind of catch you unaware. But they gave away so many free kicks as a result of their positional play. If they can work on that and facilitate something similar in training or in friendly competitions, that will benefit them massively. Similarly to many other nations, they haven't found their optimum formula yet. I think they trialed. They had Francisco Velasco in goal for most of their games. I think they trialled Aaron Turabo Sanchez in others. A real question mark that I don't think we quite have the answer to is the sporadic use of Gregg Garcia. He is clearly one of the standouts. He plays his domestic football in France, so he's exposed to a very high level. Yet he was used very sparingly across the week, and I don't really know why.
No, he was consistently brought off with like 6 or 7 minutes into halves, which really struck us as odd, because we thought, oh, well, he's one of their better players. Why are you bringing him off so early and so consistently into games? To their credit, Spain rotated their players exceptionally well. I thought they gave ample game time to every single one. They weren't just going to sit there and go, we're going to go with our starting 4 and that'll do. Like I said, they gave game time to the younger players. But yeah, it really was baffling on commentary. We're just building up Samuel Gregg Garcia, and then you go, all right, 8-minute mark, he's off. There you go. So it is something I think we'd like an answer to. If there is one or not, if it was tactical, if it was planned, we will never know, perhaps. But yeah, it was baffling on commentary.
Yeah, but it's very interesting. But with Spain, they've experienced the speed, the physicality, the tactical demands of competitions such as this. So whilst the results didn't match their ambition, the foundations are definitely there. And now it's, again, going away for the next year or two and ensuring that development, because you can come back and really challenge.
Absolutely. Just need to temper Bujabud. That's keep him on the court at all times. That's your key, because like you said, he was fortunate to not get sent off on numerous occasions. The amount of times we remember sort of holding our breath when he went in for another challenge, or I was like gripping my chair thinking, oh no, don't do it, because he definitely plays on the line.
Yeah, I can't recall exactly the fixture it was. I think it was against Republic of Ireland, and the contact just sent shockwaves through the Bella Italia sports village, that you're wincing every time he engages the ball when you're kind of waiting for this huge impact. So just showing a little bit of composure, I think, will do him the world of good, because there's certainly a player there. But then when we come on to England and we're referencing the likes of John Balding, they play with that aggression and it is right on the edge. But if you can find that sweet spot, you can benefit and you can kind of overwhelm opponents. So, no, exciting times ahead. Let's progress on to our 7th place team, the Republic of Ireland, who rounded things off with a 2-0 victory over Spain. Their story, like Scotland, was one of resilience, of organisation, but also frustration, because they just couldn't turn enough of their chances into goals, and they really had chances to change games. They lost narrowly to Denmark in their opener, bounced back with a 1-0 win over Scotland, and then held Italy to a stalemate, something I think was our only draw of the group stage games. I could be corrected on that. And even against England, they kept it tight, losing just 1-0. That consistency took them into the playoff phase, but then their heartbreak came, a 0-0 draw against close rivals Northern Ireland and defeat on penalties. How do you view Ireland's week? Was it more about their defensive structure and togetherness, or was it about the attacking chances they just didn't take?
It was a real tournament of what ifs for the Republic of Ireland, wasn't it? You know, they defensively, I thought they were superb. Really limited teams in having chances. You know, holding Italy, who were on a real high, to 0-0. England just the 1 goal. You could really see what head coach Adam Crowell was trying to do with the squad, playing 4 out, getting pickoffs in. Defensively, they really frustrated England in their game. You know, sitting two on the edge of the box, limiting the space. I thought defensively they were excellent. Going forward, they created chances. You know, I thought the movement of Tom Donahue coming into the middle and playing as a middle pivot really boosted their attacking play, because he was able to find, you know, the 180 switches and spray the ball about. The wing play was excellent from the likes of Emer O'Sullivan and Nagus Villas, Ethan McNichol. Matt Crowley was excellent in goal. Really, really excellent. I think as a second pivot, he was composed, calm, distributed the ball well. That's what you need in a 4-out system. Can't speak highly enough of his performances. It's just that conversion, the shot conversion, the big moments just did not go their way. No, I know Nagus Villas had the last kick of the game in the Denmark game to equalise, just hit the post. He had the one in the playoff. The corner ball came across. Just couldn't make his mind up as to which way he was going to swing the ball. Well, I said it on commentary, how often do you see it that a team that has dominated a game of football is the team that ends up losing it on penalties? A really heartbreaking way to go out for the Republic of Ireland. I just hope that they can use this as a reset. You know, they haven't got to panic about getting ready for a World Cup in a year's time that they may not be ready for. It's going to hurt that a team like the Republic of Ireland is not at the World Cup, because they have been at the last few iterations. They expect to be at World Cups. I think it just goes to show the level has risen around them, and they've got to get back to being at a level above that. You know, maybe they've plateaued slightly across the last few years, and the level of Europe has finally caught up to them. But I think you could see what Adam Crowell was trying to bring in, and the shape he was trying to get them to play with, that he learned with England. And I think they were really encouraging signs, but right now it will feel like a massive disappointment.
Yeah, it certainly will. I just want to reiterate about the fine margins and the individual moments that could dictate or determine results. Beyond France, that was the case for everyone. Even England, the European champion holders, they could not turn their performances and their tactics into proficiency in attack. Most of England's results beyond Scotland were 1-goal margins. But they just had that little bit of experience and know-how to get those chances over the line, even if they're just singular. And it will hurt for the Republic of Ireland because they were so close. So close. If you was to ask them now, they would say they was as good as Italy. They was as good as Denmark. They're as good as Belgium. 3 other nations who will be travelling to Argentina. And I think that's what makes it hurt even more, is that injustice of the results and their performances. I'll reiterate what you said. I thought Adam Crowell deserves a lot of credit. He made several tactical changes across the competition, and I think he found the best formula in that final game against Northern Ireland, moving Thomas Donoghue to the centre, playing Ethan McNichol and Naglis Villas out wide. They had so much balance and attacking intent. They created some fantastic opportunities, but just couldn't get the ball over the line. You've said it. Again, Matt Crowley was on another level. I don't think he gets the credit he deserves, giving them a really beneficial outlet under pressure. His distribution, if he was to assess it in terms of percentage base, in terms of relieving the attacks, it was incredibly high. And there is a real talent there to build the foundation of your team on. It's just needing to be sharper, and there is the players there to do it. But there will now be maybe 2 or 3 years until the next competitive competition for them. If they're missing out on the World Cup in 2026, I suspect that their next outing beyond the home nations will be a qualifying event for the next Euros, so an EPFA Cup equivalent. So they need to use the next 2-3 years, as we've seen Italy do, to develop themselves both individually and collectively, and then come back stronger. Because there is a few clashes in amongst that squad that if they iron out, they will be a really top performer on the international stage. Because if you're assessing player by player, I wouldn't say Italy, Denmark or Belgium are better than them. I just think they're more together than them.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment, absolutely. I think it seems almost strange to say that the Republic of Ireland have now got to go through a European qualifier to make it to the Euros. They were used to them being there. So I think they've got to just take a step back and use this as an opportunity, like I said, to go, right, this is where we're at now. This is where the level is. This is where we've got to go to get back to where we were above the level beforehand. And I think Adam Crowell had them playing some good football at times, and you could see that they were trying to buy into the shape. Yes, I think they got better as the tournament went on. That is the same for everyone. But the more game time they got under their belt in the full route, the more they got better at it, which is natural. I think it's just sometimes decisions and sometimes ball contact just let them down at the final moment. And I think Liam Lynch coming on, playing on the wing in that 7th, 8th playoff game made a big difference for them. Got a goal straight away with a good clinical strike of the ball into the corner. So I think between him and Matt Crowley, the youth is there as well to come through and help just bring that level up a bit more for them.
Yeah, I think their squad is incredibly versatile and they have the potential. It's just what they do with that potential now. Standout player for them across the competition.
Crowley, without a shadow of a doubt for me. Young, and playing in a system that you might not have been used to, but calm, composed on the ball. Distribution was excellent. Can't fault his performances really at all.
I echo all of that. absolutely exceptional from Matt Crowley. And if he continues on that level of trajectory, then he's going to be a very bright player in the years to come. Let's now progress onto their very close rivals, Northern Ireland, who came so close to history but fell just short, finishing sixth. And just to apply that context, the top 5 teams, or the finishing teams in the EPFA Nations Cup, automatically qualified for the 2026 World Cup in Argentina. So across the competition, they put themselves in a position where they were fighting for one final ticket against Denmark. And unfortunately for them, they fell just short. But before that, they had some real highs. A 6-0 demolition of Germany, one of Gregg and I's favourite games of the competition. A clinical 2-0 win over Spain. And even defeats to Belgium and France, they had huge positives. That gave them third in the group, a shot for the playoffs where they won one of the games in the week in that All-Irish derby. And then after a tense, goalless draw, holding their nerve in the shootout to eliminate them, just incredible. Give me your thoughts on Northern Ireland, because when we talk about potential, I don't think many have greater than that of them.
Oh no, this is without a doubt the squad with the most potential in Europe right now. And it all started on that very first evening. We've just seen Italy shock everyone by beating Denmark in the opening game. And then you get 20 minutes into Northern Ireland versus France. And at half time, it is the Northern Irish who are winning 1-0 against the world champions. We didn't know what to expect at that point. We thought it was absolutely just incredible how defensively strong they were, how inspired they were. This is such a young squad. They went up, they were toe to toe with the world champions who were playing full out. At some points they had all 4 players around the edge of the box, yet they weren't phased whatsoever. Yes, they did end up losing, but they made France revert back to their original shape of keeping a keeper back and just playing 3 and letting Momo do all the work. That gave them a real springboard and a real belief going forward. That's 6-0 demolition of Germany. Ruben Walls from set pieces. Welcome back to the Ruben Walls fan club. His delivery is just perfect. Power, accuracy. Gave Kyle Forster a brilliant hat-trick on his debut. We can't keep banging on about Ruben Walls, but we will do, because that kid is just, his confidence, just oozes just a relaxation, but a confidence about him that just raises the level of everyone else. He knows this is where he thrives, in the big moments. There is so much to look forward to for Northern Irish Powerchair Football. Yes, they'll be disappointed they're not going to Argentina. I think they showed great composure in the shootout against Republic of Ireland, given it's such a young squad. They led by Scott Elland, who has that experience, who's the goalkeeper, made a crucial save in the shootout. I hope the excitement I have for this squad going forward for the next 2 years is just portrayed, because the sky is the limit for them as far as what they can achieve is.
I think our expectations of Northern Ireland are slightly skewed, because I don't think anyone expected them to be a World Cup nation as soon as they were, competing in Sydney. And because of their presence there, there's almost an expectation that they must be there for the next iteration. And I don't necessarily see it like that. Despite falling short of their ultimate goal of being a World Cup nation, I think it was a breakthrough tournament for them. You've mentioned it already. Ruben Walls' dead ball delivery was the best of the competition. Hands down, no question about it. Whether it was set pieces, whether it was corners, indirect free kicks, or that incredible penalty that saw them seal a victory over the Republic of Ireland. I think Cole Forster, who is in the last year or two switched allegiance from England to Northern Ireland. A standout performance for him, scoring a hat-trick on your debut. And I should have done a little bit of research as to who scored hat-tricks across the competition. I know Momo Galame did. But Carl Force is in a very top bracket there that not many can boast. I thought Ethan McCabe slotted into the centre seamlessly at his first major competition. He's almost pushed Patrick Comiskey out, who was a standout for them in Sydney. And as you've already mentioned, Scott Hilland brought the leadership and the calmness to tie it all together. Objectively viewing it, my question for them is if they could play fixtures again or set up in a certain manner again, would they be a little bit braver? In that fixture against Belgium, when they know they needed to win it if they wanted a chance of automatic progression to the semi-finals, they sat back and didn't engage Scott Hilland as a 4-out player. He was very conservative. And then similarly, in that ultimate decider against Denmark, when they know they needed a goal, they did not want to commit players forward. I get the pragmatism of it, but I know if I offered them the chance again, they would just throw caution to the wind that little bit more.
Yeah, something I asked a few of the players. I shared the transfer back to the airport with a few of the Northern Ireland players. And something I said, in that Denmark game, you knew where the ball was going to go. There was only one option for Denmark. They were always going to tap it in from Sorensen into the path of Kvarup to dribble. That was always the game plan. Everyone could see it in the arena. But still, they sat off and let Kvarup get ahead of steam and drive him up the court. Why did you not step up and engage? Just a little bit more, because you knew that you were losing and you needed that win for the World Cup ticket. So defensively, extraordinary. Bartek Kuskowski can just score from his own half at will, it seems, because he did it twice in the tournament. And like I said, Carl Force is in a rare group of players who have scored a hat-trick at the tournament. I think Momo Galame did it. Dan McClellan did it in the first game for England against Scotland. I can't think of any others. Forgive me if we've not mentioned it. But
I think some of the French players will claim hat-tricks, but based on match sheets, I think some of them went down as own goals. So the likes of Owen Conk and Tristan Leberlet,
yes,
who were very central to at least 2, if not 3 goals. But whether or not match sheets are favourable to them, I don't know. But irrelevant of that, Carl Force is in a very elite bracket. Yeah.
So yeah, they will let the French dispute that. They are, yeah. The potential for Northern Ireland is there for everyone to see, and I don't think they need to compare themselves to 2023. Yes, they made the World Cup, but they've almost kind of taken another step back from that, brought in another level of youth that we even thought in Sydney they were a youthful squad, and they can now build and go past Sydney and into future competitions as real contenders for semi-final places.
There is the core in that group to be present for the next 10 years at least. And there's no reason why they can't emulate what the likes of France and England have done in terms of building around a core group of players who develop together and are present for the majority, if not all, of the competitions coming up. So very few negatives for me. Maybe a little bit of bravery needed, maybe a little bit of inexperience shown, but overall they held their own against everyone, even the world champions France. I said every team had their highs and their lows. Beyond France, maybe they asked questions of France, who were settling into a new kind of 4-out system at the time, and the only team to register a goal against them. So very impressive. Give me your player of the competition for Northern Ireland.
Shout out to Ethan McCabe, but it has to be Ruben Walls. I sound like I'm droning on and on, but it has to be Ruben Walls for me. He's just exemplifies everything you want for a Powerchair footballer for me, and we are founding members of the Ruben Walls fan club. Anyone is welcome to join. But I cannot wait to see where his career goes from here, because it's bound to be exciting no matter what.
I will say with a high degree of confidence that there is no better player at his age anywhere in the world. He has a ridiculously high ceiling, and he's almost announced himself on the global stage now. So yeah, I agree with your assessment. Being objective, I will say he was sensational against Germany. He brought them back into it against Belgium, half in the deficit. But beyond that, there was some games where the defence and the attack didn't necessarily link. So there were large spells where he was isolated and he couldn't impart his influence. Whether that was the tactics, whether that was inexperience, I don't know. But that's what we're there to do, is to assess performances and say how we think players could improve. I would probably pick Ethan McCabe, simply because beyond watching him in one development home nations back in 2022, so over 3 years ago, I had no real knowledge as to the levels he was competing at, his tactical understanding, and to be put in that central position, which we know is incredibly demanding against the likes of Momo Galame, against Torbjorn Kraub and others. It would be acceptable to be overawed and almost sink under the weight of expectation, but I think he rose to it brilliantly. And with him and others, there is such an exciting core. Many people will know how much of a fan of Carl Forster I am. To see him score that hat-trick and contribute really significantly was nice to see. But my player would be Ethan McCabe, with a very, very honourable mention of Ruben Walls, who was amazing.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you just said. To be thrown in the middle in a group that has Momo Galami, Brian Weiss, Ian Gensch, Florian Lechauntre, didn't look out of place one bit, did Ethan McCabe. And so for a player that I've not seen that much of at all, I was thoroughly impressed.
No, congratulations to them, I think we need to say. Let's progress on to our 5th place team, and that is Denmark. And with that finish, they book the final European ticket to Argentina in 2026. It wasn't necessarily always smooth, but when it mattered most, their experience really shone through. They opened with a shock defeat to Italy before edging Ireland 1-0. They lost narrowly to England. But then beyond that, I think they've really steadied themselves. 1-0 win over Scotland, 2-0 win over Spain, and then that big decider against Northern Ireland. They went behind early, but came back. A set piece from Sorensen, composed finish from Torbjorn Kraub to win it 2-1 and punch their ticket. Do you think it was Denmark's experience that told in the end? Or was it individual players really pushing them to that 5th place finish, Greg?
I think experience played a big part in it for me. They just had a level of composure at the end. They knew they'd been in this position before. They knew what it took to get to a World Cup, and they translated that when they needed to. I thought Torbjorn Kraub was excellent, ran the show for Denmark all week. Just everything flowed through him in the middle. I mean, usually we're used to seeing him play out wide. I don't know if that's an impact we've seen of him playing in England, or whether that's something they've been working on for a couple of years now. But their experience really just helps steady any nerves of going into a playoff situation. That would be unknown territory for them. They'd be expecting to qualify for a World Cup automatically. Of course, no one saw Italy doing what they did. And I think I certainly said it to you, and he said it to me. Crowd was pleased that Italy did continue their form over the week, because it's safe to say after the Friday we thought, oh wow, Denmark, they look shaky, they don't look very good. Whereas actually, as the week progressed, it became clear that okay, it was less of what Denmark didn't do and more that Italy were just that good, which Crowd said was good for him, because every team struggled in Italy. But yeah, for me, their quality was there at the moments it needed to be. Their clinicalness was there when it needed to be, and their experience. And they harnessed the energy that the crowd gave them. The Danish fans, for me, other than the Italians this tournament, I've loved the Danish fans now in Sydney and in Italy. They are just incredible. They give the team such a lift. Their noise is sensational. I'm really pleased from a neutral point of view that their fans will be in Argentina.
Yeah, I completely agree. In terms of my assessments, very similar to yourself. I thought Torbjorn Kraup was outstanding. And I said this to him, having caught him one evening. He struggled a great deal in that opener against Italy, to the point where I was a little bit worried about the prospects of him and the country across the competition, because it was a shock. He just looked overawed, he looked overwhelmed, he didn't get up to the pace of the competition, and he could very easily let that play into his confidence and momentum in the competition as a whole. But beyond that, he dictated the tempo, he pressed high, he won possession, stepped up in big moments, to the point now where I would even have him as a consideration for the MVP. That arc was so great and he was so fundamental to their success that we have to praise him, because whilst it was a real collective effort, without him, and when he had a lot of difficulties with his arm across the week, which saw him come on and off the bench several times in several games, when he was taken off, that's when we saw opposition have their success and build their momentum. And it needed his reintroduction to turn the tide again. So he is just so central to them, and they are clearly building the team around his skill set. We've spoken to Albin Vognason in person following the conclusion of the competition, because he was a little bit... he wanted to talk to us about the critical elements of his play. We've questioned his distribution as a goalkeeper, something that we saw several of the countries capitalise on and get their goals from, because them dead ball situations are so important, not just in attack, but relieving pressure in defence. In terms of his open play contributions, I think he was brilliant, making some sensational saves, very similar to Matt Crowley. Really nice distribution when players live. It's just when it is set and it is stopped that he didn't find the power, the accuracy, whether that was on him or the shared understanding with his teammates as to where he'll put the ball. That's something for Denmark to figure out, because either way, that's where Denmark were punished. We can talk about Sorensen and Pettersson, who delivered when it mattered most, were a real attacking threat. And with Kasper Volker Petersen, he almost went under the radar as captain, just quietly managed the games, didn't contribute a great deal in attack or defence for that matter, but just seemed to be everywhere in terms of breaking up the passing lanes and keeping momentum in Denmark's hands. So my assessment, it wasn't spectacular, but it was very effective. They showed the organisation, the ability to win under pressure, and now they're back at the World Cup, which is where they belong to be. the question I'll ask you, and Denmark for that matter, do they build on this and evolve into a side that does more than just grind out the results? Or will their identity always be rooted in defensive resilience and set piece moments or individual moments?
I think, firstly, I think Albin was very good when coming out of his goal and mopping up any danger that broke against his defence. It was just those goal kicks were the only thing that we could say, look, was a moment of weakness perhaps that they'll want to work on before Argentina next year, should they continue to pursue with him playing in goal, which I don't think there's any reason for them not to at all. I think he was very assured when he called upon them. Like you say, made very good saves. They're an interesting one, Denmark. They look to play attacking football, and in the warm-up, they are pinging the ball around with just great pace and accuracy. And there are times in games when the ball is available to them that they do play the passes, but they are not afraid whatsoever to make it a really dirty game, grind out the game. The sort of throwback style of the sport. It sometimes plays to their strengths a little bit. So I think it's great that they can switch from beautiful passing football, but also that if they needs to, they are not afraid to grind out a result. And they did what they had to do to ultimately secure their main objective, which was getting to the World Cup next year. Yes, they would have liked to have done it automatically and competing in the semi-final, but they've done it, job done. They're going to Argentina. They've got something they can work on for next year. And Krarup is going to be central, you'd have to say, in every game that they play, just to make sure that his arm is managed and he doesn't have to come off and spend a lot of time off the court, because that's when perhaps it presents opportunities for other nations to take advantage. They've got some youth coming through. I thought Tristan Faravola in his cameo, we saw he played an excellent 10 minutes. He scored an outrageous 180 finish. So there is some youth coming through the ranks. So I think there's plenty to work on. Also plenty to say, this is Denmark. We know what we're gonna get to a certain extent.
Yeah, when there's so much on the line, I can almost understand decision making of the coaches. But as a commentator who just wants to see things trialled and experimented with, I would have loved to have seen Tristan Fadarola and Carla Short-Neumann feature a little bit more, because, as you've said, very bright cameos, but when the results were as fine as they were, and knowing that there is a World Cup position, the final World Cup position on the line, you almost can't take risks because the jeopardy is so great. And I just want to see them young players be developed, be nurtured, be integrated slowly but surely into the squad, because I highlighted Tristan Falarola prior to the competition taking place as a player. I was excited to see. I think he maybe got a collective 10 minutes across the competition, but it's understandable. Had they boasted a 3-4-5-0 scoreline at any one point, I had no doubt we would have seen them experiment a lot more. I think with them as well, they will go back to... they will question that opener against Denmark because they opted for Mikael Jensen in goal. And then from every game beyond that, it was Albin Vognason. So you question if they had gone with the tried and the tested throughout the competition from start to finish, they would have probably been a semi-final nation. But these playing devil's advocate and playing hypotheticals after the fact is easy to do. But as long as that informs their decision-making going forward, that's the important thing.
Perhaps they were guilty of underestimating Italy coming into it, as everyone was, but so they can't be blamed for that at all. But they quickly made the changes, and they now know where they are going forwards, with Albin Vognason in goal. So like I said, you know what you're going to get to a certain extent with Denmark, but there are still that central group that's been together for numerous years now. I remember playing against Albin when he was very, very young in Denmark, nearly 9 years ago now. So that group has been together for some time. There's a real core. They're just such a tight-knit group, which I think was what saw them over the line in the end.
Yeah, completely agree. Is it worth asking your player of the squad across the competition?
I don't know. It might be Torbjorn Krab. I don't know. Yeah, Torbjorn Krab for me.
I will echo that. And I will also reiterate that I would not have been surprised if he come away with the ultimate MVP. It's an interesting one. We will talk about our own respective MVPs once we've gone through the nation breakdowns. But it's funny because you almost completely disregard Momo Galami now when it comes to those big accolades. Because he's in a category, in a bracket of his own, you almost want to shine lights on other players. And when we talk about the MVP, we'll talk about who ultimately secured it and our thoughts and feelings about that. But taking Momo Galame out of consideration, and Torbjorn Kraup was brilliant. And in terms of an individual performer producing moments that helped nation achieve, he was right up there. So congratulations to him. Congratulations to Denmark. We will see you in Buenos Aires, Argentina, where you will feature in your third World Cup, I believe. They were present in Florida. They were present in Sydney. And now they will travel to South America for the very first time. Let's now progress on to fourth placed Belgium. They returned to the Nations Cup after missing in 2019 and proved they're right back among Europe's elite. They opened with wins over Germany, Spain. They ground out a 2-1 victory over Northern Ireland that put them into the semi-finals. And then their last group game was a fairly convincing win for France. But with context applied, Belgium never once played their strongest team, I don't think. I think they were trying to pose question marks of their eventual semi-final rivals, England, where they dragged them all the way to extra time before losing to a Dylan Kelsall strike late. And then in the bronze medal match, again with the absolute finest of margins, they were edged 1-0 by Italy. So no medal, but plenty of positives. Greg, what did you think of Belgium's performances this week? Did you see it as a side back to their best, or is there still another gear to come?
Belgium were my dark horses coming into the tournament. Really hyped them up. I was really excited to see how they'd play, and I think I didn't realise or didn't know that they were going to operate with Ilian Gedge and Florian Lechantre as a 1-2 pivot rather than playing Lechantre out wide as we've seen him do in Paris at the Club World Cup. Job done for them. They got a ticket to Buenos Aires. That would have been their main objective coming into the week in Italy. I do think there is another level to come though. I don't think they quite hit the levels I was expecting them to play. They're getting used to, I think, Lechantre especially having to play as a sort of second pivot rather than playing out wide. But they got the wins in the games they needed to. They got that crucial win against Northern Ireland, the game that was always going to decide who finished second and who finished third behind France. It meant that they could relax in a game against France, a game that didn't mean anything in terms of sort of qualification. They were never probably going to ever beat France and finish first in the group. So they rotated, gave everyone game time in that game to say, look, everyone can say they've shared the court with the world champs. And I was thoroughly impressed with their defensive work against England. Robin Fiordaliso was exceptional on the wing, just outside the box as a sort of really ruffled the feathers of the middle players for England, not allowing any passes at all. They just worked so well as a cohesive unit, and I was really gutted for them. You know, no one likes to lose in extra time. Someone has to lose, obviously, but they could be really proud with how they performed. It was a bonus, wasn't it? A bonus in the semi-final against England, and they took them nearly all the way. So they'll be disappointed not come away with a medal, but overall they'd have said, what do you want from the week? We want to qualify for the World Cup, get back to a certain level we used to have. And I think the good news for them is that they've done it without perhaps playing to their best. They've got another year of development between Genç and Le Chantre in the middle. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they can produce in Argentina.
Yeah, absolutely. I asked the question if there's still another gear to come. I think there most definitely is. If we assess their results in order, the 2-0 victory over Germany was 2 own goals. In their game versus Spain, the 2-0 victory, it was mistakes on Spain's behalf, which gifted them their lead. Against Northern Ireland, again, capitalising on errors in the Northern Ireland defence. And then beyond that, they didn't score another goal. So across the competition, their attacking football didn't necessarily click. And that's relative to what I've seen from them in the past. There's a reason I had them as the dark horses, because I watched them breeze past opposition in the EPFA Cup back in 2022, a competition that had Italy, Scotland, Spain, Germany, all very similarly matched opponents. So I essentially said, assuming that they've developed and they've worked in the last 3 years, they will come, they will challenge, and they will have the non-negotiable expectation of being a World Cup nation. And that is what they've achieved. But as is so often the case, it's fine margins. I will echo what you said about Robin Fiordaliso. I thought he was brilliant. Elvis Bonkongu, if and when he featured, performed a very similar role. I called them the great disruptors because they put themselves in the passing lanes, which give the opposition very little to feed off. I think Iago Cordron was the clear attacking outlet. Chances were limited, but he finished some lovely goals, utilisation of his chair dummying to create the space. I thought Ilian Genç, particularly in the semi-final, was absolutely immense. But he didn't necessarily, and I have to say relative to what I've seen in the past and what people expected, hit the heights we expected. So there's still a big step up for him to show the world what he's capable of. And then arguably their best player, technically speaking, Florian Le Chantre, was used very conservatively in goal, maybe too conservatively at times, which affected their attacking play. But again, if you look from a player-by-player basis, they belong among Europe's elite. It's just doing what most other nations need to do beyond France, is to find the formula that sees them turn these fine margins into results and favourable scorelines. The foundations are there. The World Cup's secure. They've got time to sharpen up now before Argentina. It's just whether they can turn themselves from a competitive semi-finalist to a kind of consistent medal contender once the likes of USA, Argentina, Uruguay, Australia and others are introduced to the conversation. That's what my point would be.
Yeah, I think the point is they've got time now. They've secured their objective. They're going to the World Cup. Now it's about, right, what can we do to make sure we are competitive in 12 or 13 months' time? What can we do between now and then to raise our level to what some people expect us to be at? But like I said, they've got time. Another year of development between the Chantre and Genç, should they choose to persist with that as a 1-2 pairing. So I'm excited to see where they go. But they managed to do the job without perhaps playing to their best, which we can only credit them for, really. And especially with they'll be most proud, I think, of their performance with England in the semi-final. Yes, they lost, but I think it gave them a real platform defensively to build on that shows they can mix it with the best.
Yeah, I completely. And even in that 5-0 defeat to France, on paper looks incredibly one-sided. That's not how it played out. They completely altered their squad, playing the likes of Melek Kerimov and Lucas Marou, and they were very competitive. They almost knew they didn't need a result. They didn't need to overexert themselves, so they put valuable minutes into the wider squad, something that I really value. And again, it's easy for me to say as a commentator, I want to see all players feature and contribute, which isn't necessarily the reality when the stakes are so great. I just see it from the perspective of these players have travelled hours and hours and hours, invested so much time, effort, energy and money to be here. I just want to see them feature. But then that almost borders onto, this isn't a participation sport, this is elite sport. There is no charitable spots available, and if you are not up to the level needed, you will not be selected. So I need to be careful about that narrative. But overall, very convincing. And as you said, if Florian and Ilian can work on that pivot and almost adopt a 4-out phase of play, it could be so encouraging. But it's just linking defence and attack, which seemed to be their downfall. Because in that England defeat, they didn't have a great deal in terms of attacking chances.
No, if they didn't. But I think they would have known that, and perhaps they were just trying to catch one opportunity maybe they could have taken, or take it to penalties, because penalties is always a lottery. The pressure, the placement, the accuracy, you've got to have it all. So yeah, they didn't have much going forward in that game, but I think they'll be pleased with it because defensively they were just absolutely outstanding. So good tournament for Belgium, without setting the world alight, I think would be a fair assessment.
Select a player for me, if you would, please.
Ilian Gege, I think he just was at the heart of their defensive work and was the heartbeat of the team when they did get forward and wanted to play the passes. Had a couple of long-range shots, scored one really nice one. Him and the Chantre are the two that they're real standouts, I think is fair to say. But Ilian Gege was their standout player for me across the week.
I think I could select any one of those 4 main players and there wouldn't be a great deal of arguments to the contrary. So yes, I don't disagree. Ilian Gege, on paper, the standout, was sensational against England, frustrated them so much. But I think a lot of credit for me is down to the Robin Fiordalizos, the Elvis Bonkongas, and the Iago Cordrons, who had a really interesting role to play because it wasn't in an attacking sense. It was both supporting defensively, but really ensuring that positional discipline and not giving away 2-on-1s, which is a difficult role to play. There's always typically a third defender, one of your wingers that contributes in defence. When there's 4 involved in the defensive phase of play, you have to be so organised, so disciplined, and I think they did that brilliantly. So I'm excited to see them in Argentina, that's for sure.
As am I.
To the hosts, Italy, without question, the story of the competitions, debutants at this level, and they leave with the bronze medal. They started, as already mentioned, with that shock 2-0 win over Denmark. They pushed England to the very end. They held Ireland before beating Scotland. In the semi-finals, France proved too much in a 5-0 defeat. But in the bronze playoff match, roared on by the home crowd, they edged Belgium 1-0 to take a historic medal. They were sensational. Greg, as someone who watched every second of their action. How impressive was it to see them adapt so quickly to this level?
Oh, it was a joy to watch. It really just, you couldn't help just getting wrapped up in the whole story, the whole fairy tale of it. Just, we saw in that opening game, and they gave us the anthems for the opening game as well. That set the tone. I said it in the podcast before we flew out. The Italian national anthem on Italian soil was something I was really looking forward to. It didn't disappoint. The crowd noise was just something I'll never forget. It was the best atmosphere in every game that I've ever had the pleasure of commentating on, or even just a game I've played in. You run out of words to describe just how magical it really was to watch them play with such passion, such pride, such togetherness. And I think that all stems from Marco Ferrazza, the head coach. You ask those Italian players, every single one of them, none of them will take credit for themselves. They will all point to the head coach and go, it's all down to him. We questioned why he'd retired, why he'd taken that step out of playing the sport. In a way, I'm so glad he did, because he's now formed this group that will just fight and die for each other. It was just incredible. We wanted to see that opening game. They got the win and we thought, wow, was this a shock? Or was this just Denmark not being up to the level? It turns out Italy were right up there with the best squads in the tournament. How wrong we probably would have been in that preview podcast, Ryan, because I don't think anyone expected Italy to be anywhere near the level they were.
No, and we happened to be at the same restaurant as them following their victory over Scotland, which confirmed them as both a semi-finalist of the EPFA Nations Cup, but also, more importantly, as a World Cup nation. So we got almost the tail end of this celebrations, and it almost gave us an opportunity to spend time with the wider squad, many of whom have very good English, many of whom listen to this podcast and question our assessments and our predictions. And I essentially had to apologize, because they said you didn't think we would achieve anything. You didn't think we would go on to hit the heights that we did. And I said, you are completely right. I will hold my hand up and say that I underestimated you. I never in a million years would have seen you go on to exceed every metric and expectation possible. But isn't that what football's all about? Be having that underdog mentality and channeling it to be the stories of the competition. And we didn't do it in the prediction episode, probably for the best. But we was going to do our 1 through 10 in terms of where we saw each of the teams finishing. And I will say now, I had Italy finishing 10th or 9th. Based on what I've seen from them in the past, based on the fact that Marco Ferrazza opted to retire from the sport and become the head coach, I had no reference point to how they would perform at this level. And to see them come and do what they did, when the eyes of the world are watching, when there is a huge pressure as hosts, it was so amazing. And they are the story of the Powerchair football world. This transcends continents, and I will use this as the shining example for any nation now, that if you put the development in, you get the right people backing you, the sky is the absolute limit. It was remarkable. Simone Ranzato was one of the standouts. He was awarded MVP. I said we'd go on to say it. I can't argue with that, because he was so central to their success, both in defence and attack. I thought Gabriel Mindru, we've highlighted Robin Fiordaliso as playing such an invaluable role for the Belgians. Gabriel Mindru is the exact same for Italy. He listens to this podcast, so I'll be overly kind to him. And I've also challenged him to improve his English to a level where he will be a guest in Argentina, which he's promised me. He was brilliant against England particularly, and Belgium in that bronze place medal match. Emiliano Bortoluzzi, started the competition so well, but as it progressed, as Italy's game plan became a little bit more predictable, relatively speaking, was exposed against some of the more attacking teams, was still brilliant, a standout. And then Giovanni Bernabé Capra. I have known Giovanni for years. I've commentated alongside him, as you have as well, Greg, at various continental and international competitions. We know how talented he is away from the court. For him to come and produce the levels he did, world-class levels, was, for me, the shock of the competition. I never knew he could play like that. He could slot in so seamlessly. He's obviously very recently got his citizenship with Italy. So it was a very late inclusion to the squad. And out of nowhere, they've almost got a player to build the squad around. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it's rather annoying, isn't it, Giovanni? He can speak about 6 different languages. He can commentate well. He can sing really well. And now he's quite a good Powerchair football player as well. He can do no wrong, apparently. It was shock, and I hope they don't take that the wrong way, because no one knew what to expect. I think
they feed off of it. I think they like it, and they came in with almost a mentality of to prove people wrong, because no one expected them to do what they did.
It was their togetherness, like I said. You saw it even before a game started. They get the crowd involved, the drums, and the passion of playing for Italy just thrives in that squad. Bortoluzzi and Anzato, as a defensive partnership, yes, got exposed slightly towards the end, but for large swathes of the tournament were just incredible. Mindru, defensively on the edge of the box, was exemplary. Bernabé Capra, just like I said, no one saw that coming from him. I had no idea. The fact he plays for Upsilon Châteauneuf-Malbry's second team shows the level of their second team, clearly, because that's ridiculous. I'm sat here, and the people can't see this, but talking about Italy and what they did last week has just brought back a massive smile to my face. Just remembering how incredible it was to sit there and commentate on the magic that was unfolding in front of us. It was, I look back with such fondness, and I thank them for giving me such happy memories.
Their support was incredible in Geneva. Their support was incredible in Munich. So we always knew they would bring that support, that enthusiasm, that energy to a competition on home soil. But even with that expectation, they exceeded it. And it's a cliche, but they were like the fifth player. Talking to some of the England squad just after their game, they did not know how to adapt to that environment. They've played on the biggest stage against some of the biggest teams, in front of some of the biggest crowds. But that game versus Italy posed questions of them that they've never been asked before. And the same can be applied to every one of their opponents. Feeding off that support is what gave them the edge and showed that they belong. The question now is, are Italy already a long-term contender, or do they still need another cycle, another 12, 18 months to refine things before we see them compete consistently at this level?
I think for them now, they're no longer the unknown quantity. I think not a large part, but a small part of their success came from the fact that no one expected it, and they fed off that. Now, and you saw as the tournament went on, people started to understand what they were about and tried to game plan against it. They've got to spend the next 12, 13 months before Argentina adapting their play so they're even better, so they surprise us again. They can't go in expecting the same level of unknown quantity, because they've really just shocked the entire footballing continent and the entire footballing world with how well they played. And I just think they've got to harness that energy now, that momentum, to springboard them into Argentina, because I cannot wait to see their passion mixed with South American passion on a Powerchair football court. It's getting me excited for 12, 13 months time.
Yeah, I think we had a joke on commentary to predict how many yellow or red cards would be shown in a potential matchup with the likes of Argentina and or Uruguay, where passion is the overwhelming emotion, and we see that play out. Give me a player. Hard ask. Obviously, all of them played invaluable roles to the wider success. But if you was to whittle it down to one,
Simone Razzato. It's hard to pick one because they were all just exceptional. But he was captain. He was at the heart of the defensive work, and he springboarded them going forward. He got crucial goals against England and in game, especially Denmark. He just exemplified everything it meant to lead an Italian team in a major tournament on Italian soil. So Simone Razzato for me, stand out by the barest of margins, because they were all absolutely exceptional and a joy to watch.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. He was a worthy MVP for the wider competition, and seeing the support and the recognition from his peers just made it that more special. There has been competitions in the past where once that MVP has been announced, there's been a lot of question marks. So it's really nice to see that widespread recognition and appreciation for someone who truly does deserve it. That being said, I will probably say that my standout for Italy, is Giovanni Bernabé Capra. So many players came up to me following fixtures with Italy to say he is one of the most horrible players I've ever played against. And I mean that in the best sense of the word, in terms of disrupting rhythm, constantly on your tail, limiting success, and then spearheading attacks for Italy. Added to that, the coming out of absolutely nowhere and producing world-class levels when very few people have a reference point to the levels you've competed at in the past. That is why I would pick him. But take nothing away from that core four in Bortoluzzi, Razzato, Mindru and Bernabé Capra. But players on the periphery, the likes of Arini Infantino and Gabriele Zoggia, they contributed if and when they were utilised. And now I want to see the players away from the starting core be developed to ensure there isn't that dip in standards or levels when the consistency of games at a World Cup far surpasses the likes of an EPFA Nations Cup. In Argentina, assuming it's a one or two court venue with 10 teams competing, you're very likely to be competed in 2 games a day across 5 days. And that is a level of intensity that cannot be put on the shoulders of just 4 players. So this is a message for all nations, not just Italy. You have a responsibility to develop a squad, not just a starting 4, if you're going to go on to exceed and achieve at world level.
Absolutely. But like I said, can't take anything away from any of them. The atmosphere, I could fill a 2-hour podcast just talking about how much of a privilege it was to be there for their week. A magical story that, like I said, was the highlight of my week. They became my second favourites. They were like, I became almost, you're an 8th Italian. I was half Italian at points during the week. So yeah.
Well, we've been assured that we will have Gabriel Mindru on the podcast around Argentina, but this is a message to any of the English speakers within the squad currently. We would love to sit down and chat with you. I know we probably don't need to ask Giovanni to come on. He will, of course, volunteer his time and expertise, but if Marco Farazza or others want to have a good conversation where we can dedicate a whole episode to unpacking their success, that will be a really exciting insight. But let's progress on to the silver medalists, something that is a little bit of a touchy subject for us. Brits, England were the runners-up. On paper, it looks strong. 5 wins from 6, a 6-0 start against Scotland, that comeback win against Italy, who we've praised to the high heavens. Narrow victories over stubborn defensive teams such as Denmark and Ireland. Likewise, in the semi-finals, they managed to find a way to grind past Belgium in extra time before falling 1-0 to France in the final. So if you're referencing just the scorelines, you would say they're competitive, they're consistent, and they're close. But it's another final reached without ever really convincing people of their performances or quality. We know what they possess. We know what they're capable of. But sadly, the overwhelming emotion from England's campaign is disappointment. Give me your assessments.
Yeah, it's interesting summing up England's tournament because they made the final. And in a results-based business, you have to credit the mentality that they showed to dig deep in games that they weren't playing well in to find a way to consistently get the wins. And so I cannot fault their togetherness and the mentality to grind out results. But you have to say, on the court, it wasn't to the level we expected of England. A lot of the time, they never really put in a 40-minute performance that made us sit back and go, okay, yeah, look, there's England. They've arrived now. It was frustrating to watch, I think, at times for a lot of people because it just always seemed to never quite click. I'm not sure why. I don't think anyone can really put their finger on it at the moment. There'll be a debrief and they'll look back at it, I'm sure. But frustration and disappointment, I think, are the overwhelming themes coming back because I don't think they really tested France in the final. Yes, it was only 1-0, but that is because in the second half, France learned from 6 years ago when they were 2-0 up and still tried to play attacking football, and it cost them. This time they were 1-0 up and they went, that'll do, that's fine for us. Momo have the ball for 20 minutes, knowing that England never really phased or threatened them at all at the back. So, like I said in the predictions podcast, I said France would win, and I was hoping that that England would prove me wrong because I wanted to be wrong. I'm an Englishman at the end of the day, and I did get a lot of jokey banter from all the England boys saying, "How dare you say France? We're gonna put in a performance that shows it." But I just think it just never seemed like it clicked, did it, Ryan?
No, it didn't. But I will go back to what I said at the start of this episode is, as commentators, we have a very strict mandate to be completely objective and impartial, irrelevant if it's our country of origin or someone we have a soft spot for. We have to look at things objectively. And it didn't click. It wasn't poor. They were disciplined, they were patient, they were efficient. But in terms of their open play football, it didn't go their way. It was a complete contrast from what we saw in Sydney, where they played with a little bit more freedom and fluidity. Within this competition, they relied heavily on set pieces, which we know is such an important part of the sport. But you want that to be a balance where it isn't of the detriment of your open play football. You want to kind of be completely proficient at both and just have that high success rate from set pieces if and when they arise, not for them to be 90% of your goals. 9 of their 11 goals came from dead ball situations in the first, second or third phase, which tells a huge story in itself. So if you're looking at positives, you'll say that they have now added that to their arsenal, but now they need to revert back to how they was before in terms of the open play proficiency, something that they have built their foundation and 4-out system on. The question is, was it England underperforming, or is it that simply that Europe has caught up and the margins are now that much tighter?
I think there's an aspect of that. I think there's an aspect of teams knowing they're playing England, so they're going to drop as many players behind the ball and frustrate England. But it's down to England to know that that's going to happen. England will not have expected anything less going into the tournament. They're not that naive. They'll know that teams are going to defend and park the bus against them a little bit more than they usually are against some of the teams they can perhaps think they can get wins against. And full credit to the teams that choose to do that. You play the way that you think you can get the best result out of the game, and it worked. Okay, they didn't get results. It worked in frustrating England and keeping the game close. So they were always, every team that played against England, barring Scotland in that opening game, were always in the game against them. They were never comfortable, and I think that showed in the fact that there was a lot of clamouring for rotation. England were never perhaps in a position where they felt comfortable enough to rotate, which was what we saw a complete difference between England and France, where England were 4 or 5 goals, France were 4 or 5 goals up, and they were rotating for 2, 3, even 4 players at a time. They were making sure that everyone in their squad got ample game time. So you're right, it will please the coaches that the work they've done on set pieces was really executed to a high level of quality and accuracy, you have to say, a lot of the time. However, their open play was lacking a lot of the time. And that is something they really can't afford to lose out on, because it's what has set them apart from the rest of Europe with France and the rest of the world alongside the US, you have to say. So they will want to make sure that the levels are married going into Argentina, because like I said, we have to be unbiased, and we can sit here and go, it just wasn't good enough a lot of the time.
Yeah, hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? And if you're Adam McAvoy, do you trial and change things given the opportunity again? One thing I do want to reiterate on this episode, because during the streams and the commentary, we can see all of the comments coming through on YouTube, and there was some pretty scathing reviews of Chris and John and the role that they perform in that England team. And I want to reiterate, in terms of my own perspective, that they are 2 players that are absolutely central to England, not just now, but in the future. They have achieved so much together as a pair, and beyond their quality and their technical and tactical understanding of the system in which England play, it's their experience, their leadership, the things that aren't necessarily tangible that make them so invaluable. And I don't want that familiarity and that expectation that they'll be part of the English squad to play into a narrative that means that they are no longer up to the level. Because whilst there's some very exciting players in the likes of Ethan Fisher and Tyler Reeve waiting to force their way into the narrative and the lineup, I think had they been introduced, I think the results and the performances would have been far more in favour of the opposition than they were. And let's not forget, in those controlled performances, those 1-0 wins over the likes of Republic of Ireland, Belgium and Denmark, the success came from Chris and John, and that needs to be reiterated. And what I want to see from them now is to have the underdog mentality where people are doubting them, and then they will come back better, sharper, more focused, with this adversity from Italy fueling them to win the World Cup.
Chris and John are two people that have been, alongside a couple of others, the heartbeat of English Powerchair football since it started. They have seen it all. They have put in so much time, effort and energy and sacrificed a lot to be the best, to be up there with the best that have played the game. And they are still operating at an exceptionally high level. Everyone has their opinion, of course. We'll things we'd like to see maybe differently, or things we'd like to see some things maybe tweak. And I think John and Chris welcome constructive criticism and a bit of banter. But I think there has to be a fine line, and there is absolutely no place for any hatred or comments that may overstep the line at all, because these are two people that are still at the heartbeat of a leadership group in that team, that every player in that squad will still look to Chris and John to set the standard. I know I did it 6 years ago. They are the two people you look at and think they are English Powerchair football. They are the captain and vice captain for a reason. So this sport, at the end of the day, yes, we're professional, we're trying to be elite, but we are a community. That cannot be lost upon anyone, because we all see each other in Nottingham. There's no hiding away from anything. So yeah, I think John said it excellently in his recap post. He said, this is the first time I've ever experienced hate towards my performances. I don't think hate's the right word we should be using. Constructive criticism, yes. Voice your opinion, yes. But don't cross the line and hate someone who has and still is the benchmark.
Yeah, where applicable and necessary, I will always provide constructive criticism to players. I have to be careful, having never played the sport, having never lived life with a disability. So I always have to be very cautious. But I think if you apply it and say it in the right way, in the right manner, constructive criticism can be incredibly beneficial. And if that is how you intend your comments, then that's fine. But there was times where it did overstep the mark, and you can ask questions about what comes next for England and the pathway of younger players trying to force their way through. That's a very fair debate. But for me, tournaments like this show exactly why Chris and John are so crucial to England. And I take into consideration everything in that, not just what you see on the court, but in the warm-up rooms, in the restaurants, when they're in the breakout spaces, when they're socialising as a collective. And I said it on our preview episode. I said it on my sit down with Adam McAvoy when I said this is the most unified the squad has ever been. It's a statement that I say that is applicable to the 8 players, because they are so together, they are one, and this week will really hurt. But now I'm excited to see how they channel that, because now they need to go back to the drawing board, figure out what went wrong, and use that to fuel what will hopefully be a World Cup push in Argentina. So, no, it's a challenging time, and one where England have got real question marks over their heads now. But I think they'll like that, and they'll rise to the occasion and the challenge that comes next.
Absolutely.
Can I push you for a player of the squad?
Cool, I forgot about that. Interesting. I'm trying to think about who's stood out for me.
It's a dilemma that I've had as well.
Yeah, I think Chris Gordon for the back. I think for me, yes, and he said it in his recap post on social media. He's very disappointed with the goal they conceded in the final. He won't look back on it with too much fondness, but I think he was at the heartbeat of what England were trying to do, and defensively I think they were outstanding, weren't tested at all. So I'd say Chris was one of the two that played every minute of the games pretty much for England. He had a 5-minute rest against Scotland, but that was, I think for me, Chris was a standout for England.
I've said it on commentary. I've said it several times on the podcast. I think Chris is the most important player in that England squad. I don't think anyone can do what Chris does. And it's a real shame that the one defining moment of this competition came via a lapse in concentration, something that is so rare for him. And when there was so much jeopardy and on the line. But yeah, I agree. Chris, very central. I think he will review every second of his performances from the first game against Scotland through to the final whistle against France. And knowing him as I do, he will now use that to channel his performances and his application in competitions going forward. It's hard to settle on any one player with England because they rotated the wingers so much, where none of the four wingers in Marcus Harrison, Ed Common, Dan McClellan and Dylan Kelsall really made them positions their own. So it's hard to pick one of those. You could probably edge it towards Marcus Harrison just through the defining moments throughout the group stage. 2 single goals in 1-0 wins over the Republic of Ireland and Denmark. Very crucial. And he was very positive throughout that. But overall, it's a very different conversation we're having with England now, and something we have to adjust to.
And I think it shows in our tone of voice with how we're discussing a team that's finished second compared to how we just spoke about Italy, who finished third. Technically, England finished second and had a better tournament, but there's such a difference in expectation and performance level relative to where the teams played that our mannerisms and our tone of voice are different.
Everything is based on relative expectation. They were the holders, they were the finalists in Sydney, so we expected them to come here and put on a real show. It didn't materialise that way, and that's okay. I also want to go back to the question I asked you at the start. Is this England underperforming, or the rest of the countries in the continent exceeding expectations and really performing? I think it's a bit of both. And,
a bit of both.
And it is a bit of both. There's no question about it. But don't underestimate the role of the other nations in this context and conversation, because the likes of Denmark, Italy, Republic of Ireland, Belgium, so impressive, and they exceeded our expectations. So we can't, on one hand, praise these nations and really fault England. There needs to be a balance between them.
Yeah, they were certainly in the tougher of the two groups. Group B, thanks to Italy's performances and how defensively sound Scotland were from open play, became the group of death compared to Group A. I think that's fair to say.
I agree completely. So, yeah, commiserations again for England. But now go back to the drawing board and ensure that for Argentina and beyond, we don't have a repeat. Let's go on to worthy champions, France. There's no question about that. No matter who you ask, there is not a single question mark over their heads. champions of Europe once again, having lifted it first in 2014 in Limerick, Ireland. They fell so short in Finland back in 2019. And beyond that one blip in the final back in 2019, they have been the benchmark. They have been faultless. They have been unstoppable. In this competition, they carried on that rich vein of form. 6 games, 6 wins, 33 goals scored and just 1 conceded. It's not far off every other one of the nations combined scoring the same amount as France in this competition. Remarkable. From the first whistle, beyond the first 15-20 minutes of Northern Ireland, where they were posed a few questions, they were the best team in the competition. They delivered in every scenario. They blew teams away, 7-0 against Spain, 10-0 against Germany, and even against Northern Ireland and Belgium, they looked a class above in the fullness of time and context. In the semi-final, they silenced a very partisan Italian crowd with a ruthless 5-0 performance, something no other nation was able to do. And then in the final, when it wasn't about running riot, they showed another side, as they so often do, producing one of the most dominant, controlled 1-0 wins you will ever likely see. It completely nullified England to the point where I don't think Brian Weiss, as goalkeeper, had a single save or defensive action to make. Greg, when you look back, what impressed you most? France's ability to just blow sides away in the group stage, or the way they managed the tie to knockout games when it really mattered?
Where do you start with this French team? You run out of superlatives. We ran out of superlatives on commentary to describe some of the football they played. What really impressed me and what really surprised me almost was the fact they can now do it both. They can play a 4-out system with Brian Weiss and Momo Galami as pivots. Even we were so excited to see that in the opening game, and it didn't work in the first game against Northern Ireland. Credit to Northern Ireland for that, but they kept with it. When that works, it is absolutely devastating. It is beautiful to watch. We just were in awe, really, of what we were watching at times. But then to have the ability to, in the semi-final, where Italy had shocked everyone and put in great defensive performance and we closed, they were the only team that put the sword to Italy. And that was with the greatest respect of Italy, who we love and praise highly. France made them look average. Just really just one-touch passing. The finishing was exquisite. If you want to see an example of a great goal, Mohamed Galami, the third goal, he puts it in a ball's width gap behind Menzato. I still don't know now how he's managed to do it.
Can I correct you? It wasn't a ball width gap. It was smaller than a ball width gap. I've never seen a goal defy physics such as that. And we won't select a goal of the competition because for us, having commentated every second, most of them blur into one. But that was the clear standout. The combination of passes between him and I think it was Erwan Konk on the edge of the Italian box. A Italian defence that had been imperious up until that point were just pulled apart. And the end goal from Momo Galame was absolutely unbelievable.
It was the fact that they could rotate any player onto the court and the levels maintained an exceptionally high standard. Aurelien Finatra was incredible, and I think pushed Mohamed Galami and Brian Weiss as standout players. They just managed to get, and the final, yes, it did ruin it as a spectacle slightly, but for France, it was dominant. From the first whistle to their last, they just did not give England a sniff whatsoever. I think I can remember one front bumper at the edge of the box John Boulding had that maybe forced to say that of Brian Weiss. That was it. That was the only chance they had. England didn't get going at all because France just smothered them. They got 1-0 up through that goal that Chris Gordon will not look back with fondness. But after that, they just said, Mohamed Galami, take over the game. Lock it up. And he did. He absolutely just took the ball and went, yeah, this is mine now. You're not having the ball back. I'm going to sit here for 20 minutes. And whoever they brought on, whoever they rotated, it did not make a difference. They were a joy to watch. It was clinical Powerchair football, but played at such a high tempo. I toot my own horn. I predicted them to win, but even I didn't see them producing some of the football they produced last week. It was just staggering.
I think we so often praise and commend the Momo Galames and the Brian Weisses, but someone that I want to shine the spotlight on just for a second is David Verge, the head coach. Absolutely inspired tactical approach across this competition. The balance and the adaptability that France exhibited just shocked the world. No one could set, no one could prepare, because they completely reversed expectations on how they would set up, the players they would utilise. We know Momo Galame is their talisman. His goals, his dribbling, his assists, creativity. He's in a bracket above everyone else on the planet at the moment, and there's no one close. You've mentioned Aurélien Filatre. He blossomed on the biggest stage, and fittingly, it was his strike that sealed the final. For me, probably the MVP, up for debate, but something we've discussed on several occasions. I had question marks over Tristan Lebelair in the early games. He answered and silenced me as the competition went on, and his confidence and sharpness increased. There's Erwan Konk, typically the goalkeeper, has always been that for club and country, used higher up in the court, showed his flexibility, and it just epitomised France as a whole, swapping roles, adapting systems, and still dominating whoever they're faced. But for me, one of the clearest ways to sum up just how dominant France were is by looking at Brian Weiss. Normally such an influential central player, he spent most of the tournament sitting in the deep, new defensive role, and in truth, he was like us, a spectator for the most part. He had so little to do, even in a 4-out system, because France's influence and possession in the final third meant that he never needed to defend and never needed to really support. He had very few touches across the competition relative to what we would expect him to do. And that for me is so impressive. So I just have to applaud France, because we knew they were world leading. We knew they were the benchmark, but they've somehow managed to find a new level that has left the rest of Europe just looking up.
We are used to England being the only team playing a realistic 4-out shape. And even that couldn't get near France sometimes, who played with one back. France now have gone, you know what? We're going to play 4-out. And that is so good to watch, but it's so scary for how good it could be. Give them another 12 months of development, because there are times, and I said it on commentary, where Momo and Brian didn't quite know their distances between them as pivots. They got a bit gated, so the balls could go between them a little bit. And when they got pressed, sometimes their shape and positioning was a little bit off. Give them another 12 months of development for Argentina to work out those kinks. My word, I can't even fathom how good they're going to be in Argentina if they carry this on. Like I said, we ran out of superlatives. I'm getting the dictionary up at half time going, what? Use that word, I've used that word, I've used that one. But I'm looking for new words I can use. I was blown away by how good they were, and then how dominant and controlling they could be in games when they needed to be. They showed that side of them that went, yeah, we've played the good football, now we're just here to win. They had that edge to them. They wanted this trophy back. They wanted to show they were the best in the world, the best in Europe. Because they've got the world champions, but they weren't the European champions, and that would have hurt them a little bit, I think. To be able to win on the world stage but not win in their own backyard. Now they've done that. They are just on top of the mountain looking down at everyone else going, you've got to step up, and step up some way if you're going to get near us.
The scariest thing for me is that they didn't even look like they got out of second gear. It looked effortless. So if you are the likes of England, USA, Argentina, and others that have aspirations of lifting that trophy in Buenos Aires, what do you do? Because the adaptability and the flexibility they showed across last week shows they've got, if something doesn't work one way, they can drown you another. It's so exciting. And as a Powerchair football fan, ultimately, it is a pleasure and a joy to watch. Even if my affiliations and my heart is with the England team, I have to completely separate from that when it comes to the role of commentary. And I can only just commend the efforts and say, you are the benchmark, you are the level that every single player and team on the planet aspires to be, and we just need to enjoy it.
Yep. They did it at a canter. They just looked at ease. They did it in their stride. Nothing phased them. Okay, they went 1-0 down to Northern Ireland. There were a little bit of frustration thanks to good work in Northern Ireland. They went, okay, scrap the 4 out. We're going to go back to our 1 and a 3. Momo take the ball, and they won. What was it? 5-1 in the end. It was just, they've got an answer for everything. If one thing doesn't work, they switch to another style, and they're still just as good. So watch out the rest of the world, because if you thought France were good in Australia, Argentina is going to be just something else.
Well, we've got just over 12 months to wait, but as time seems to fly past at the moment, I'm sure it will be here in a second. Okay, that I think serves as the perfect recap of each of the 10 nations. A fantastic week of football, the best I think we've ever experienced. The baton truly hands over to the other World Cup qualifiers now. In the next 2 weeks, we have the APO Cup, where Australia, New Zealand, South Korea and Japan are fighting for 2 available spots. Really excited to see what they do. And then in November, the America's Cup. 2 tickets available, with Argentina being confirmed as host, but it'll be Argentina, Uruguay, USA, Canada, Mexico and Brazil, I believe. Forgive me if I am forgetting anyone. So it's so exciting, and by the end of November we will know how Argentina looks in terms of the 10 teams that will comprise the 2026 Fit for Powerchair Football World Cup. So just to wrap this episode up, we will just select our picks for certain categories. You are welcome to give me your top 3 for each, Greg, and I will follow. Let's start with team of the competition in order.
France, if we're going teams within nations, France number 1.
Yeah.
Because they blew everyone away and were just sensational. Italy number 2. Just for their meteoric rise in the story and how magical it all was. And I will say England for number 3, because they made another final and they set pieces were exquisite, and their mentality to grind out results in games that they weren't necessarily playing at their best in was something I could applaud and admire. So those are my 3 for me.
I have selected Italy as number 1 just because they exceeded every expectation and they shocked the world. And whilst France hit heights that we didn't know were possible, Italy as hosts, the story was just perfect. And the fact that they've come away not only with the bronze medal, but a World Cup ticket just fills me with so much excitement for the future. So Italy 1, France, of course, 2nd. If I could do joint first, it would be Italy and France. And 3rd, I've got Denmark. I thought beyond that opening game against Italy, they showed their experience, their grit, their resilience. And if they can work on their attacking football across the next 12 months, maybe nurture through Carla Neumann and Tristan Fadarola, They could be a really exciting team in Argentina, but they're there, and I'm excited that is the case. Take me through your player of the competition, top 3. And before you do so, shall we take Momo Galame out? And just to say, he is in a stratosphere of his own, and he is the MVP at every competition. So I'm going to cheat a little bit and say he cannot be considered because he's too good to be in the context of this.
Yeah, I was just toying in my brain going, do I put in 1 or 2? Do I put in 1 or 2? Okay, so if we're taking Momo Galame out because he's too good and it's just a cheat code, Simone Ranzato won then for me. I think MVP deservedly. He was, like I said, at the heart of everything for Italy. Captain fantastic, just led them superbly well. So he's number 1. I will then go Torbjorn Kraup number 2. Again, same thing with Ranzato. It's everything that Denmark did went through him. He was the one that could dribble them up the court, get them away from danger, scored a couple of crucial goals, just embodied everything about the experience and the quality Denmark needed to show. And then I'm going to go Giovanni Bernabé Capra above Aurelio Falatra be my 4th shout. But between the two of them, I was just, because he came out of nowhere and was so impressive with just how nitty gritty he was and his ability to score a couple of good goals, just his all-round performance, he just edges out Aurelio Falatra for me for the 3rd spot.
Well, that gives me the perfect segue to go on to my top 3, because topping it is Aurelien Falatra. I thought he was sensational. I think he featured in each of the 4 positions at any one stage across the competition. When he was the goalkeeper as the most defensive, some of his calmness, his distribution, his control was exquisite. I need to try and clip a certain moment where he controls it, draws a defender in, engages it in a 180 and distributes it out to the top right-hand wing. We was almost speechless on commentary. And for him to perform consistently across the competition, score that winning goal, I said it to him, I'll say it now, I think he should have been given MVP, again, with the context of Momo Galame out of consideration. My number 2 is Simone Ranzato. Incredible player. We spoke a lot on commentary across the week about how his positioning, his teamwork, his communication is probably grounded in his world-class power hockey play. A very competitive player within that sport and discipline, and it translated beautifully. And what's more impressive is I've watched him in Geneva in 22 and Munich in 2023. In no way was he close to the levels he showed in 2025. So if he can exhibit a similar level of development over the next year, he will almost certainly be a standout in Argentina. And then 3rd, I said it earlier, Torbjorn Kraup. Beyond that opener against Italy where he struggled, he was sensational, both in defence and attack. And he will be central to Denmark for the foreseeable future. And it's really exciting for us here in England because he's opted to compete once again in the National League Premiership with Liverpool-based Greenbank. So we will get to see him across the next 12 months in the lead up to Argentina, and that excites me a lot. So that is my picks, but if we go in honourable mentions, Giovanni Bernabé Capra would be 4th. So we've got essentially the exact same list, just in a different order.
Yeah, Falatra was, his utility could play anywhere. We were at times speechless. I've said it to him because his English isn't great, but I was like, just très bon. So it's so very good.
I think a lot of players downplay their level of English. A lot of them listen to this podcast and are able to question and challenge us on things we say. So whilst their talking in English may not be as proficient, they understand everything.
So they just don't want to talk to me, is that what you're saying, Rad?
Probably. And to cap things off, give me your fantasy team of the competition. 4 players that comprise a very exciting squad. Trying to take into consideration both positioning and classification.
I was about to say, are we playing like proper positions?
A nice balanced squad that could be fielded.
Wow. Okay. So are we allowed to include Momo Galami in this one?
You're allowed to include Momo.
Right. Well, he goes in the middle for me. Enough said. Shall I move on? I'm gonna have Aurélien Falatra on one side. I'm really trying not to just pick the entire French starting 4 here. I think then, as much as I'd love to like move Simone Ranzato and put him on the wing, or put Momo Galami in the wing and put Ranzato middle, I can't do it. So Giovanni Bernabé Capra goes in on the other wing, and then it's just a matter of who goes in goal. I want to say Brian Weiss, because I know he didn't do a lot defensively. I think he worked as a pivot exceptionally well with Momo Galami. So for me, I think he was a standout keeper, not necessarily for what he had to do defensively, but going forward. So 3 French, Momo Galami in the middle, Brian Weiss in goal, Aurélien Falatra on one wing, and Giovanni Bernabé Capra, who speaks fluent French, so the chemistry is there absolutely. It rounds out my fantasy team of the season. I think that complies with classification as well.
Yeah, I think it does. My fantasy team of the competition, very similar. Obviously, 2 of my picks for the player of the competition in Simone Ranzato and Torbjorn Kraup, they're central players. Their best football was played in the centre. And if and when they featured more for Toby than Simone, he wasn't as influential. So that means he sadly misses out on my 4. Momo Galami, the captain, the talisman, the creator in the centre. I've got the exact same as you. Aurélien Falatra on one wing, Giovanni Bernabé Capra on the other, and I've selected Matt Crowley in goal. I think that in an attacking team where his distribution is more influential in attack, in contributing forward, I think he could be unstoppable. And if they introduce him into a more 4-out system, my God, that is a scary prospect. But that just highlights, in a team that fell short of their goals and aspirations of a World Cup ticket, they still have individual performers that can be into this narrative. And based on your facial expressions that no one will be able to see, you're almost gutted you didn't select him as well. So he is a testament to the exciting nature of Republic of Ireland, irrelevant of results.
Yeah, as soon as you said it, I went, yeah, I probably could have picked Matt Crowley in there as well. I've just fallen into the trap of going Momo and Brian again, haven't I? So I have absolutely no issues with picking Matt Crowley whatsoever, because in that team, I think he would be very exciting. But I can't complain with the 1-2 pivot of Momo Galami and Brian Weiss.
No, you can't at all. Well, I think that serves as the perfect recap for the 2025 EPFA Nations Cup. Greg, it was a pleasure to preview. It was a pleasure to commentate all 29 games together and to close the chapter, to recap through this episode. I'm almost fed up with the sight of you now, so I'm going to need a little bit of time before we reunite. But it has been a real privilege, and being able to relive the drama, recognise players and teams who made it so special, it gets me so excited for competitions in the future. So a huge thank you to everyone that's listened to this episode of the 2-on-1 Powerchair Football Podcast. I think we'll be back very soon. I've got a podcast lined up in the next day or two to predict the upcoming championship. But until then, thank you for listening. And thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Ryan. Amazed we've still got voices left to have done another 2.5-hour podcast. So, yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Best tournament. Privileged to have done it alongside you.